Hey everyone, in this video I want to look at the different types of logs we now have available with a Log Analytics Workspace, part of Azure Monitor Logs. As always, this is useful. A like and subscribe is appreciated. So we have a Log Analytics Workspace that powers Azure Monitor Logs. Now, many things are built on top of a Log Analytics Workspace. Things like Azure Sentinel, hey, that uses a Log Analytics Workspace. The various insights available for Azure services, hey, they use a Log Analytics Workspace. It's fantastic for ingesting logs from many types of Azure services. Other services can have connectors. I can even have custom logs going into a Log Analytics Workspace. And then once I have the data in my Log Analytics Workspace, I can get insights about the data using the Kusto query language. This really powerful way to query all of that data. I can do joins over the various tables into which the data I ingest is actually structured. Now, if we look back and how this all started, there was one type of log. So I can think about, okay, I have my great big Log Analytics Workspace. What we're used to is the idea of analytics logs. So I can think about we have this certain type of log. So we have these analytics logs. And this is the default type. This is what we're used to when I think about a Log Analytics Workspace. And the way this works is, well, firstly from a retention, how long is the data kept in there? It's either this 31 days or things like Azure Sentinel may expand many of those to 90 days. So I have a certain default number of days that the data is kept. But I can configure it actually up to 2 years. So 31, 90 days default, but I can change that up to 2 years. Now, for the data inside this analytics logs, well, firstly, I can ingest huge amounts of different types of data from all different types of services. Once it's in there, I have the full capabilities of that Kusto query language. And there are no limits on the number of queries I can run. And there's also no cost. I'm paying, so what am I paying for? I pay for the data that I ingest. So I'm paying for the ingestion. I pay a certain amount of the ingestion. And then also, if I want to keep it beyond that default amount for Log Analytics Workspace, well then, I also pay for the retention beyond that included amount. So I have the full scope of all the different types of queries I can run. I can do joins across. I have all of the capabilities. I pay for the data I'm bringing in to that analytics logs, the Log Analytics Workspace. If I want to keep it for longer and have that capability to run all these queries, well, then I start paying for that additional amount. So if we actually go and look at the pricing page for a second, I can see I'm looking here at my analytics logs, and I have this pricing per gigabyte per day. So this is all about ingesting the data. So it's really about, hey, I'm paying for this per gigabyte ingested. And what I have here is these per day options where I can have a committed amount of ingestion. So I pay less money if I commit, hey, I'm going to ingest this amount per day. So then I pay less per day for that amount of data. But if I didn't do that, I just pay this regular pay-as-you-go rate for the amount of data that I ingest into it. So I'm paying for the data ingested. That's really the key part of that. Now, it is pointing out there are certain types of data that I don't pay for data ingestion charges, like the Azure activity logs. I don't have to pay for that ingestion. But then we have data retention. So beyond that initial amount, so it's telling me here, look, for the first 31 days or 90 if Sentinel is enabled, well, I get that included. Azure App Insights, that's also 90 days without charge. But then beyond that, I start paying for the data per gigabyte per month. So I start paying for that additional amount of retention if I need it beyond the amount that's by default included. So we really have those two dimensions to regular analytics logs. I pay for, hey, the actual ingestion of the data. And if I want to keep it longer than the amount that's just included, hey, I pay for that retention as well. And I have full control over that. I can configure a default retention on the workspace. And what's nice now is I can also have tweaks around the individual tables. If we actually went back to the portal, they recently lit up a new view. So if I was to actually go and look at my Log Analytics Workspace, we have now under settings, this tables view. And this shows us all of our tables. And what you can see is we have a plan. So the plan is actually showing me the type of logs. So nearly all of mine are analytics. It's showing me this interactive retention. Ignore the archive period for now. We're going to come back to that. So it's telling us the number of days. It's telling us the workspace default. But I can tweak these. For example, I can actually go and manage the table. And I can say, well, don't use the default workspace. I want to change this maybe to some higher number. So yes, I could change the default for the entire workspace, or at a table level, I can go and change that interactive retention. So the interactive retention is, hey, based on this particular type of table, I want to be able to run those queries using my KQL. So great. We have this fantastic analytics log type. I have this full KQL language, but obviously it's costing me money. And there may be certain types of scenario where I don't need the full rich set of capabilities of KQL. I need very basic capabilities. Maybe I have some logging coming in. I really want to be able to quickly do troubleshooting, debugging. I don't need it for analytics. I don't need to generate alerts off of it, because obviously one of the nice things I can do with analytics logs, I can also do alerting. I have a certain type of log where it runs a query and then it can alert off of that. Maybe I don't need that. I just have, hey, some verbose logs coming in. I need them for a fairly limited amount of time, so I can do basic record-based queries against it. So now we have a new type. What we also have available to us now is this idea of basic logs. So now I can think about another type, put it next to here. Basic logs. Now with basic logs, I have no configuration over the retention time. It is 8 days. No more, no less. I have a limited set of the KQL available to me. So I don't have all the full sets of KQL where I can do the joins across tables. It's a much simplified version. Again, it's designed for some debugging, some troubleshooting. I don't need to be able to do joins across different tables. So I have a limited KQL. And the key thing is now I pay when I perform those queries. So with analytics logs, hey, I pay for the ingestion, I pay for the retention, but there's no cost for the queries I want to run. If I use basic logs, I do pay when I perform the various queries. But my regular cost now is significantly less. I still pay for the ingestion, but it's a much smaller cost for that ingestion. And there's no concept of additional retention. It's 8 days. So now if we go and look at our pricing page again, and if we go and look for our basic logs, you can see, hey, basic log data ingestion is, let's say, 61.5 cents per gigabyte. Remember, analytics logs without that commitment where I could get discounts was $2.76. So there's a big difference in the pricing of those two offerings. But then I have to pay when I'm actually running those queries. So the basic log's great. I have that basic data ingestion, but then I pay for the queries that I actually run against it. So that's one of the key points of that. Now I cannot use this for every type. So the default is going to be analytics logs. So that's the default of what we have. All of the tables, they're going to be analytics logs. Some of them I can then change to become a basics log type. But it's very specific today. For example, for the built-in Azure ones, I can have the new type of container log v2. So for container insights, they modified container insights with this new v2 version to, instead of writing the data they need to multiple tables, they now write it to this one table, which removes the need to do cross-table joins, which means it's fantastic for basic logs. Also app traces for app insights I can use for basic logs. So if we was to jump over for a second and we go to the portal, what are those two tables? So I have a container log v2 because I have some of the newer container insights. But I also had the older container log. Now if I look at my container log v2 and do manage table, we'll notice the table plan is analytics, and it's got that interactive period of 30 days. But if I was to change this to basic, well, now the interactive retention is 8 days, and I cannot change that because basic table is hard-coded to 8 days, never more, never less. But it's setting my total retention to 30 days, which means there's this archive period of 22. And we're going to come back to why that exactly is. But now I could hit save, and it would now change this particular container log v2 to basic. Also, I could have my own, again, custom logs that I design using data collection rules. I could use the basic log types. But it's all about the fact that, well, this particular workload, i.e. container insights v2, they changed their structure to support the idea of, hey, we'll put everything in one table. So it makes it very, very powerful to do. So now I can just use the basic logs. I don't need that enhanced set of KQL capabilities. So basically I can cut my costs. So providing I don't need more than 8 days of, in this case, container insights, for example, I really am just using it for, hey, if troubleshooting, maybe some debugging, so it's a fairly small time window I need. 8 days is plenty. Hey, if it supports it, I'm going to save myself a lot of money actually on that ingestion charge. So this is a great option where I have those data scenarios where I do just need these fairly basic, just at a table level, record-based queries. I don't need a huge time window. This is what this is designed for. Now, once again, I said by default, all of the tables are analytics. So I have to go and change it to become a basic table. I think I can switch it. I think it's once a week. I can switch between them. Some tables won't give you the option if they don't support being basic logs. Now, behind the scenes, it's not really actually moving the data. It's the same resiliency, the same redundancy. It's just limiting the query capabilities available to you, which means there's less compute cost on the Azure side, which is why I get these cheaper sets of capabilities. Now, a key point for both of these, remember, was this was interesting. On my board today, it's not moving. I don't know why. This was interactive. So the whole goal is I can run the queries against these in an interactive way. What about if I need to keep the data for maybe certain regulatory reasons, but actually I don't anticipate I have to be able to run queries against it. I just want to keep it. Now in the past, what we may have done is send it to a storage account, for example, so I can do that longer term retention. Then it's fairly painful to really bring it back in and do useful things against it. And so what we now have the option of using is the idea of archive logs. So we have this other type that I can leverage, and we have archive. And once again, these have the same durability as these other types. I'm not getting less resilience in any way. This can be up to 7 years. So 7 years is a fairly common number in a lot of regulatory things. So now I can say, hey, I need to keep it for up to 7 years, and I pay for the retention. That's how this is built. So the idea is, hey, I have a certain amount of interactive. Then once it goes past the interactive time, and if I've configured it, hey, I want to keep it now in archive for another 60 days or 90 days or 2 years or 7 years, I can configure those things. Once again, what I'm going to pay for when I get to the archive is that retention. So I can go over here and we look at, hey, log data retention. And you can see, hey, past what the default is included, I start paying 12 cents per gigabyte per month. So I'm keeping it there, I'm keeping it handy and available, so I don't have to then, if I need it, go and bring it back from somewhere else. But I cannot run queries against this. There's no way to even run this limited set of KQL against this. I have to bring it back into analytics logs to actually do things. But first, this is what we were seeing when we changed that container logs v2 to basic. Because remember, let's say it was 30 days I had in the table, and I changed it to basic. Well, now I've only got 8 days. Well, what if I want to move it back to analytics? I'd have lost the other 22 days. So what it was doing for me, just to protect me, was when I tried to change it to basic, what it's doing behind the scenes is saying, well, currently this table you have here, well, you have 30 days. So your interactive retention is 30 days. So your total retention is the same, 30 days. So there is no archive. But if I was to change it to basic, it's saying, well, your interactive is only 8. But tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep the retention as 30, which means there's a delta of 22 days. So my archive is automatically being configured as those 22 days. The benefit that gives me, if ever I change my mind and I want to bring it back to become analytics logs, the data is still there. It can just make that data back available when it becomes an analytics table. So that's why it's doing that behind the scenes. So, archive logs, I just go and say what's the retention period I want in total, and it will use the archive log value for the difference. So if my interactive is 30 days and I set my total retention to 120 days, well, that delta is the amount of time it will keep it in the archive logs. So it's very easy to go and manipulate and configure those things. But I said I can't actually do operations against this directly. I can't just run even a limited KQL. There's no dollar fee to be able to run a query against the archive logs. So what do? How do I actually do something against the archive logs? So what I have to do is there's two things I can do. The first is I can perform a search. So I can perform a search, and I can actually perform a search against archive. I can also perform it against basic. And what it's going to do is actually create a brand new table in analytics logs. It's going to be something underscore search. So it's a brand new table in analytics logs. So of course, once it's now in this brand new table in analytics logs, I get the full scope of KQL available to me again. So I can perform this search, and what I pay for is the amount of data scanned, and then I pay kind of that result ingestion. So those two things are what I'm going to pay for. So basically bring it out of archive. Well, it's still in archive, but make it available through this new analytics logs table it's going to create underscore srch, then I can now run all of my queries against. This is an asynchronous process that's going and performing that scan. When I configure the scan, I can have a 1 year window. So it can be any 1 year window within that up to 7 years, but I can't scan the whole 7 years. I pick a certain 1 year at maximum time slice that I'm going to perform that search over that total retention within the archive. Now, when the data comes into this new table, obviously it's going to get a new time generated value, but it will also have an underscore original time generated. It will have an original underscore original type, an underscore original item ID. So I can still go and see what the original data was, but it is going to get a new timestamp, things like that. Coming back up to 1 million records, there are some limitations on it. So if we go and look at the details of those search jobs, I guess firstly, I do pay for those. So we talked before about the idea of sort of those searching. We pay for the data scanned, for example. And then there's all these other different things we have, the types of logs, etc. But then in terms of the search job, today I can do it via a REST API or the AZ CLI. So it's giving me examples of both of them. But in terms of the actual limitations, it's 1 query table at a time, up to 1 year as we talked about. It can take up to 24 hours. So it's very long running searches it supports, 1 million record sets. And then it talks about sort of limitations on the search result tables per workspace, the number of search job executions per day per workspace, 5 concurrent search jobs per workspace. So there are some limitations about actually using those search jobs. But the end result is when that's finished, I will end up with a something underscore srch. Notice it's telling me my type is a search results. And my retention is going to be the workspace default. So it's retained just like anything else. So in this case, it's 30 days. So in this case, I took the data and have now made it available via this new table it has created. Now, again, this is all really about the idea that the data doesn't necessarily move as such. There's certain types of hot cache available. There's compute resources allocated to things, but it's bringing it back now into this new table so I can now operate all of the full types of results against it. So that's one option. I can do a search against my archive if I now need to go and actually perform certain queries against it. I can bring back that 1 year window and then operate against it. And it's going to get retained for that default amount. The other option, well, I could actually just perform a restore. So from archive, I can just perform a restore operation. And that's going to create a something underscore, a new table again, underscore RST. So it's bringing me back a window, again, of time into here. I pay for the amount of data I'm restoring and the period of time I'm making it available for. Think about a price per day until I dismiss the data. So this is an important point. If we go and look now, so I've done a restore. We can see I also have this Azure activity RST. I can see it's a restored log. The retention is blank. So that's kind of weird. There is no retention period. It is going to stay there until you dismiss it. So I'm going to carry on paying that price until I dismiss it. And the way I dismiss it is I delete it. That's how I dismiss that data. Or until the underlying archive data rolls out and then the data is gone. But that might take 7 years, for example. That would be a really long time. So I do need to be careful with these. When it's the restored logs, what I'm paying for is actually the amount of time. So that data restore, you can see it here. So I'm doing this data restore job. Well, it's per gigabyte per day. So if I had a 7-year retention, I forget to delete that table, I'm going to carry on paying this. So the whole goal of when I do a restore is that, hey, I'm restoring it for a certain reason. I want to do something with that data. Once I've run those queries against it, because again, I've done the restore, it's now back in analytics logs. I have my full KQL available to me. I do whatever I need to do, and I delete the table. So then I stop paying for that cost. So it's really important that for these ones, I don't just leave it because it's not going to age out. There's no default retention. The whole point is I've done this restore for a reason, so it doesn't want to automatically delete it prematurely. So, hey, it's going to keep it there until I delete it or the underlying data ages out. This could be a really long time, so I probably don't want to keep it for that long. Once again, there are some limitations. If I go and look at the documentation for my restore logs, once again today, I can do it via a REST API or CLI call. So the data has to be restored for a minimum of 2 days. I can restore up to 60 terabytes, up to 4 restores per workspace per week, 2 restore processes in a workplace concurrently, and only 1 active restore on a specific table at a given time. So I can't go and do another restore against a table I've already restored. I need to go and delete the other one first, and then I can do it. So then it's telling me, hey, the pricing model is based on the volume of data you restore and the number of days it is available for. So that's the whole goal of that one. Whereas again, on the search jobs, hey, it's the amount of data that it needs to scan, and then the amount of data ingested into the results table. And so that's it. I mean, that's the whole goal now of these different types of data available to me. It's all about now I can tune it based on how do I intend to use the data. If I want that full set of insight capability, the full capabilities of KQL, hey, I'm going to keep using those analytics logs. Fantastic. If I maybe have data coming in that really is, maybe there's quite a lot of data as well. It's fairly verbose, so it would normally cost me quite a lot of money for that ingestion, but I only need it for a fairly small time window. I need fairly basic sets of KQL against it, just really looking at records in a particular table. Basic logs is great for that. It's a fixed duration, but I pay a lot less money for that ingestion. And then I do have to pay for the queries I'm running against it. Again, analytics, I don't pay. I can run as many queries as I want. And then beyond the interactive requirements I have with my data, be it analytics or basic, I can configure now a total retention time. And the delta between the total retention time and the interactive time, it will keep it in archive where it's a lot cheaper. I can keep it up to 7 years. So it saves me having to maybe dump it out to a blob account or something else and then have the complexities of bringing it back in. I can now keep it available with the same durability as the rest of Azure Monitor logs. If I do need to work on it, hey, maybe I want to run a search job to bring it back in. I pay for the amount of data it has to scan as part of that search and then the amount of data it has to ingest. Or, hey, I just want to restore this time window and bring it in and I get, again, a new table. I get the full capabilities of KQL against it. So that's it. If you are using Log Analytics and maybe you are a little bit about on the price of this, take some time to understand what you are doing with the data. Take some time to think about what do I really interactively work with and maybe what do I just keep for the sake of keeping it? What are the types of queries I run? Hey, is maybe basic an option for me? And use it to just optimize your costs. Hope it was useful. Until next video, take care.